This presentation is about the late Alexander McQueen. A few years ago, back in 2011, while taking my first introductory classes into fashion design, I happened to come across a dress of McQueen's while doing research for a project. I was instantly mesmerized. I had never seen anyone do what he did with his clothing. My disappointment at finding out that he had just taken his life that year before made me feel robbed and saddened at the thought of never getting to experience the thrill of seeing his genius create anything new again. Alexander McQueen was one of the most influential designers of the 20th century. He was a four-time winner of the British Fashion Awards British Designer of the Year. In 2003, he was a CFDA Award winner for Best International Designer and was honored with a CBE Commander of the British Empire from Queen Elizabeth II for his services to the fashion industry. Famous for his dramatic runway productions and expert tailoring, McQueen used his runway shows to tell a story using recurring themes of light and dark, life and death, and birds of prey for inspiration. He referred to himself as the Edgar Allan Poe of fashion. On February 10, 2010, the day before he was to attend his mother's funeral, Alexander McQueen took his own life, sending the fashion world into shock with the sudden loss of one of its most successful designers of the time. The funeral featured Scottish bagpipes to honor McQueen's proud Scottish heritage. Even in death, McQueen's genius still influences the world of fashion. In the summer of 2011, the Metropolitan Museum of Art put together an exhibition of McQueen's most influential pieces. The Metropolitan has been around since 1870. Located in New York City, it has housed some of the most famous pieces of art known to history. The Metropolitan Museum of Art collects, studies, conserves, and presents significant works of art across all times and cultures in order to connect people to creativity, knowledge, and ideas. Alexander McQueen came from very humble beginnings. Born March 17, 1969, he was the youngest of 6 children. His mother was a social science teacher and his father was a taxi driver. He grew up in the East End of London and was known as Lee at that time. He dropped out of school at 16. He then started as an apprentice tailor at the Savile Row Tailors, Anderson and Shepherd in London. McQueen's expert tailoring skills were developed here. Finding the work boring, McQueen left in search for a different job. At 21, McQueen applied for a teaching position at Central St. Martin's College of Art and Design. The famous school had produced other well-known designers such as John Galliano and Stella McCartney. After being turned down for the job, he was offered enrollment instead as a student. McQueen then returned with sketches and samples of his tailoring and was offered a graduate position immediately. In 1992, McQueen graduated with his M.A. and soon after debuted his first collection called Jack the Ripper Stalks His Victims. The narrative was based on Jack the Ripper and Victorian prostitutes. According to history, the prostitutes would sell their hair to be made into locks, which were then bought by people to give to their lovers. Subsequently, McQueen stitched locks of human hair under the lining of his clothing. Some of that hair was McQueen's. Fashion editor Isabella Blow was in the audience the night McQueen debuted his graduate collection. She had loved the collection so much she bought the entire line. She has been credited with being the one who discovered McQueen and introduced him to important people within the fashion world. Of McQueen, she has said, "He takes ideas from the past and sabotages them with his cut to make them thoroughly new and in the context of today. And he is like a peeping Tom in the way he slits and stabs at fabric to explore all the erogenous zones of the body." Under the name Alexander McQueen, he started his own label and showed his first collection in 1993. The first few shows were very anti-establishment, with models and mohawks flipping off the audience. In 1996, McQueen's controversial collection, Highland Rape, was shown. When the collection first debuted, it was deemed very provocative for its time. The images of women in torn and ripped clothing stumbling along the catwalk gave the impression that the show was referencing the rape of women. These violent and aggressive images of battered women labeled McQueen as a misogynist. Alexander, who was very proud of his Scottish heritage, insisted that the narrative was about the rape of Scotland by England and not the rape of women. The narrative was making reference to the Jacobite Rising of the 18th century, which ended with the desecration of the Scottish Highland lifestyle. Following the controversial Highland Rake collection, McQueen's Dante collection for autumn-winter 96-97 was a much more scaled-down show. People were then able to see how well made his clothing was. Of the clothing he made for women, McQueen has said, "I want to empower women. I want people to be afraid of the women that I dress." The collection featured fine boning and military embroidery, braid trim hussar's jackets, and an 18th century style gold brocade admiral's coat worn with a shredded lace dress and a black jet encrusted headpiece made by the jeweler and art director Simon Costin. Very soon after the collection debuted, McQueen won the 1996 British Designer of the Year. On October 14th of 1996, McQueen was named head designer of Givenchy. At the time of his appointment, founder Hubert de Givenchy was apparently not satisfied with his successor. Hubert had dressed and designed for Audrey Hepburn in the past and did not think McQueen a good fit for the fashion house. At the age of 27, McQueen was set to show his first haute couture show for Givenchy. The collection was not well received by the French press. His second haute couture collection for Givenchy did better and was well received as he stuck closer to the refined glamour that was the standard at Givenchy. At the time, he was working for both Givenchy and his own label. He was doing around 10 collections a year between the two labels. The images on the left, from top to bottom, are for McQueen's label. The dresses on the right were for Givenchy for their fall-winter 97-98 haute couture line. Wanting more creative freedom than Givenchy was allowing him to have, McQueen signed a deal with their rival, the Gucci Group, by selling 51% of his shares of the Alexander McQueen label. He left Givenchy in early 2001. With the financial backing of the Gucci Group, McQueen was able to create freely, the only caveat being he had to create clothes that would sell. His productions grew more ambitious and he continued to push the limits of his creative ideas. For his spring-summer 2001 Boss collection, McQueen had the press crowd around an enormous mirrored box, forcing them to watch their own reflections while they waited. They waited for over 2 hours. When the show did begin, the models were revealed inside the mirrored box where they could not see out, but the press could see in. They were described as looking senseless, bumping into the sides of the box, and looking very much like mental patients inside of an asylum. At the end of the show, a smaller box that was located in the middle of the mirrored box opened up to reveal a naked woman covered in moths. McQueen found inspiration for the photograph done by Joel Peter Witkin, aptly named Sanitarium. Many found the images disturbing and dark, and the portrayal of women unnerving. Another example of his ambitious concepts making their way into his runway shows was the infamous Kate Moss hologram featured in the Widows of Culloden Fall 2006 show. It was the finale to the show, which was another reference to his Scottish heritage. An interesting side note about the hologram is that it references a 19th century practice called Pepper's Ghost, which was a device that gives the illusion of a spirit often used in seances in the 19th century. The dress was made up of hundreds of unfinished ruffles that helped create the airy and floating feeling of the dress. On the next slide is a video of the hologram. With the transition from a small-scale London label into a global brand, Alexander McQueen launched his own menswear collection in 2001. During that year, he also opened up his flagship store in New York City, and in 2003 opened 2 more stores in London and eventually in Milan. He launched a perfume, designed a luggage line, and expanded into accessories during this time. In October 2005, McQueen collaborated with Puma. It resulted in 13 styles of shoes, 9 created for men's and 4 for women's. The prices range anywhere from $250 to $330. Following that collaboration, McQueen launched his MCQ label, which was a more affordable denim-based ready-to-wear line, which included both men and women's wear and accessories. Alexander McQueen is better known for his haute couture lines, which can range in the tens of thousands of dollars and above. Although he also designed ready-to-wear lines, it was only the richest women who could afford either. Even his more affordable line, MCQ, which ranges in the hundreds and above range, targets a higher-end consumer. Back in 2008, like many designers have done in the past and are currently doing, McQueen had collaborated with Target and designed an exclusive line to be sold in their stores. The line was priced at $129.99 and under. Amidst the success of his private label going global, McQueen would soon face tragedy with the loss of a friend and muse. On May 7, 2007, the woman who had discovered Alexander McQueen, Isabella Blow, took her own life. She had been battling depression for a few years and had attempted to take her life several times before, swallowing poison and passing away in 2007. McQueen was devastated by the loss of his friend. In collaboration with famous hat designer Philip Tracy, who Isabella had also discovered, McQueen dedicated his spring 2008 show to her. The show, named Madame Bleu, featured an electrical silhouette of a bird which would light up to give the effect of flapping wings. Some of the models wore hats designed by Tracy as a tribute to Isabella, as she had been so fond of his creations. In the spring of 2009, McQueen planned to livestream his new collection named Plato's Atlantis for his ready-to-wear Spring-Summer 2010 line. 30 minutes before the show was set to start, so many people logged in to view the show that it caused the website to crash. The theme of the show was said to be an apocalyptic prediction of the ecological meltdown of the world. The models embodied a biological hybrid of women and sea mammals. The idea being that as humankind came from the sea, they may in the future head back to it. The show was one of McQueen's best, and received rave reviews from the press. One of the dresses might seem familiar, as it is the one that Lady Gaga wore in her Bad Romance video, as can be seen here. Alexander McQueen was under immense pressure to continue to come up with better collections than his last. He had suffered from bouts of depression throughout his career, but on February 2nd of 2010, McQueen suffered a blow he would not recover from. His beloved mother, Joyce, died after losing her battle with cancer. A day before her funeral was set to take place, Alexander McQueen, at the age of 40, took his own life by hanging himself in his London flat. McQueen left behind a handwritten note that said, "Please look after my dogs. Sorry, I love you, Lee. P.S. Bury me at the church." McQueen's last collection, ironically named Angels and Demons, for his fall 2010 ready-to-wear line, was 80% finished by the time he died. His chief designer, Sarah Burton, who had worked with Alexander quietly for years, helped complete the collection. The fabric he ordered had digital photographs of high church angels and Bosch demons printed onto them. The aggression and disturbing images that were always present in his earlier collections were not seen here. Instead, his expert tailoring skills had translated the romanticism of the medieval Madonnas and Byzantine empresses he had been studying at the time into his last 16 pieces. Sarah Burton became Alexander's successor and has been the creative director of the Alexander McQueen label since his death. She famously designed the dress that Kate Middleton wore for her wedding in 2011. Alexander's legacy lives on in both his existing pieces and his influences on the fashion world. His fashion label continues to produce haute couture and ready-to-wear collections with Sarah Burton as the chief designer. I would like to end this presentation with one of my favorite quotes of his regarding his profession. "For me, what I do is an artistic expression which is channeled through me. Fashion is just the medium."